Hey guys, what is up and welcome back to a new video. So guys, this is the 9th video in the Learn Python series, and in this one we're going to be covering our control flows if statement. Alright, so till now all of our programs that we've written have been pretty one way and haven't had a lot of depth to them. We've always had a program that would follow a set of steps and execute them in order. Alright, what we're going to do right now is we're going to learn the if statement, and what the if statement allows us to do is it allows us to check for different for different things, and it allows us to execute code according to some values and stuff, according to some expressions. All right, so let me give you an example. So let's have a number, and let's say that number, let's have a variable and say that variable is equal to 5. All right, now what I want to do is I want to check whether or not this variable is even or odd. Alright, and if the variable is odd, I want to print out the variable is odd, and if it's even, then I want to print out it's even. Right, now I can't just write a code saying something like this. I can't write this, right? I can't write n plus and n comma is odd, right? And then I can't just duplicate this and expect the program to execute the code according to what it thinks, because the program doesn't know what odd and even numbers are, right? It just knows that it has to print both of these things out. So if we run it, it gives us if we run our if statement, it gives us 5 is odd and 5 is even. But that's not right, is it? Because we don't want to print both of them at once. You want to check whether or not this number is odd or even, and we can do that using the if statement. Alright, so let me write the if statement. It's very simple, right? You just write the word if and then your expression over here. Alright, now if you remember in the operators video, I told you guys about the modulus operator, right? This one, and this one gives you the remainder of division. Alright, so if you have something like 10 modulus 2, it will give me 0, because 10 divided by 2 has a remainder of 0. Whereas if I do something like 11 modulus 2, it will give me 1, and that's because when you divide 11 by 2, you get a remainder of 1. Alright, and if you see over here, you might notice a pattern. Whenever you divide an even number, whenever you mod an even number by 2, you get a 0, and whenever you mod an odd number by 2, you get a 1. So we can make use of this in our if statement. We can say if n modulus 2 is equal to 0, or let's say 1. That means it's an even number, right? So if you take a look, that's an odd number. So if you take a look at this code, I'm saying if, and I'm giving the operation over here, if n modulus 2 is equal to, this double equal to sign checks whether something is equal to another. If you were to just put an equal sign, it wouldn't make sense and it'll give you an error. So you have to put a double equal to sign over here. Alright, is equal to 1. Now what this is saying is check if this number modulus 2 is equal to 1, and then I have a colon over there. The colon denotes that this operation is over and I want you to do something over here. If this is true, then I want you to print out n is odd. Now note that there is some spaces over here. This space is called indentation. Alright, you might know what indentation is from MS Word or something like that. But you basically achieve indentation by pressing the tab button. So if I press tab, it gives me 4 spaces, which is the default for Python, and any code that is indented inside this if statement is basically run when this operation here is true. So now say over here, let me just make this a comment so it doesn't run. And now if I run this, it says 5 is odd because 5 modulus 2 is equal to 1. Now if I say n is equal to 4, then it prints nothing because this is not true. Okay, so this executes if this operation here is true. Now there are a lot of other operations that you can do, not only with equal to, you can also have greater than, you have less than, you can have greater than or equal to, or you can have less than or equal to. Both of these work as well. You also have and. All right, we'll get into and a little later, but now let me have another if statement over here, saying that if n modulus 2 is equal to 0, then I want you to print out that n is even. All right, so now let's try the code. And it says 4 is even, and if we change this to say something like 155, it says 155 is odd. All right, so that is what you can do with if statements. Now you can see I have two if statements over here, and I know for a fact that if the number is not odd, it is going to be even. So instead of having this other if statement over here, I can use what is known as an else. Okay, and else basically checks if this is true, it'll execute this, right? But if it's not true, then it will go on and execute this. So if this or else this, all right, that's basically what the else statement does. Now the else statement always has to be beneath an if statement or an elif statement. We'll get to elif statements later, but an else statement always has to be below this. It has to be the last statement in this set. All right, so now if you run it again, you'll see we get the same output every time, because it's just basically checking if the number is odd. If it's not, it has to be even, so it's just printing out number is even. All right, now let's try another example. Let's remove all this stuff and let's have an input statement over here. Let's convert the input into an integer, and let's have enter a number. All right, and what we're going to do now is that we're going to check whether a number is positive or negative. So we have if n is greater than 0, it has to be positive. So we'll print out n comma is positive, and then we'll have a else. Let's have an if again, which is if n is less than 0, then we'll print out n is negative, and we'll have if n is equal to 0, and we'll have print out n is 0 is equal to 0, right? So now let's run this code and let's see what we get. So let's enter a number. Let's enter, say, minus 65. It gives us minus 65 is negative. Awesome. Now let's run it again. Let's say 77 and enter. 77 is positive, and let's enter something like 0 now. All right, let's enter 0, and this will give us, let's enter 0, and this will give us 0 is equal to 0. Awesome. So now we can see, now we can see we have got 3 if statements checking for different operators, right? But we know that if both of these aren't true, then this has to be true, right? So what we can use is something called the elif statement and, of course, the else statement. Now this code will do the exact same thing, all right? But it'll do it a little differently. It'll give the same output, just a little differently. First, it will check if number is greater than 0, and if it is, it will print out n is positive. If it's not, then it will move on to this statement, okay? Elif basically stands for else if. It's like a abbreviation of else if, and if this is not true, it will check if this is true. So if this is true, it will print out n is negative, but if it's not true, it will move on to the else statement, and over here it will print n is equal to 0. So when we run this code, it will give us the exact same result. It won't be any different than what we did before, except now the code will be more efficient, because rather than having to check all of these all these expressions, it will just check one. If it's not true, it will move on to the second one. If that's not true, it'll move on. Okay, so we can have anything we want after this as well, and it will ignore, because see, this is not indented, right? Because this is not indented inside of this, it won't, it'll anyways print, it's outside the loop. So it will print done either way, because it's not indented and inside any of these else or if statements. Anyways, I think that should be enough for today. Okay, now let's cover the and as well. Let's cover and or. So let's cover n, and let's say n2 is equal to 5. So now over here we're going to say if n is greater than 0 and n2 is equal to 4. Do you want to print this? So now what this checks is not only does it check for the number that we input being greater than 0, it also checks for this being equal to 4. Okay, now as you can see we got a little error here. It says 6 is equal to 2 is equal to 0, but that's wrong, because what the program's doing is it's checking if this is true and it's not, and then it's moving on to check if this is true and it's not, and then it's moving on to check if this is and it's just executing this, right? It's not checking for anything. So what we can do is we can change this to an elif statement saying elif n is equal to 0, then print out n is equal to 0, right? Now if we enter 6 again, it'll just print out done, because this is not true. We can also have an OR statement. An OR basically checks if this is true or this is true. So if either one of these is true, it will execute what's over here. So let's run that. Let's enter number 5. It prints out 4. 4 is positive because it is positive. Even though this is false, this is true, and so it prints out this thing over here. Now let's make n2 4. Okay, let's make the value equal 4. And now let's enter a negative number. And now it says -5 is positive. And that's because I am checking if n2 is equal to 4. And it is. So it does not matter what this is equal to. It just wants one of these being equal to true. And so you can execute this in the same way as you can in the elif statements. And you can have ORs. You can have multiple ORs. You can have multiple elif statements. You do not need to have an else statement, but your elif statements have to be below an if statement. Remember about the indentation. You have to indent code that you want to run inside of the if. You cannot have code like this. You cannot have something like that, because that will basically break the if statement down, and this won't have an elif statement before it. Anyways, guys, that might have been a little confusing, but if it was, then you can check the links I have in the description to get a better idea what this is. If you have any questions related to this, you can comment them down below, and I'll get back to you as soon as possible. Anyways, guys, I'll see you in the next video. Make sure to subscribe and like the video. Bye bye.